Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the second story from chapter 43 of the Road to Latin textbook. Now this story is called De Gallia Omni II, and it just continues the story we already saw at the beginning of chapter 43. Now before we go too far into it, like I always tell you, if you want more resources on this chapter, the stories, the vocab, the grammar, whatever it is you might need, feel free to check out my website. You can find all my stuff there that I use in my classes. So if you're looking for something just a little different, maybe it'll help you out or just make it easier to understand the textbook and grammar, things like that, feel free to take a look at it. Now, before we dive in, like I always tell in these videos, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have a really strong grasp on the vocab. I know this is the second story from chapter 43, so you should feel pretty comfortable with it, but it never hurts to go back. Just make sure you feel really good on the new vocab, some of the old, so that you understand what's going on, because it's really hard to read and understand Latin if you just don't know what the words mean. So always start there. The other thing I'd recommend you do is do the read and reread method. So read through this entire story. Write down any problem areas you might have as you go. So it could be words you don't understand or sentences, things like that. Whatever it is, write them down. Then when you're done with your read, take a look at your list and see where you went wrong. If it's words you didn't know, that's kind of easy. You can just look them up. If it's grammar, it might have to do with this chapter's grammar, right? Maybe you go back and look at the grammar again and just see where you went wrong. But you try to kind of shore up all those problem areas you have, and then you repeat the process again and again. It might take you 2, 3, 4 times, whatever it is, of reading and doing it over and over again. But you're looking for a point where you can read through this entire story. You don't need to write anything down. You don't need to look anything up, and you can understand all of it, and if not, close to all of it, right? That's how you know you're in a good place with the vocab, the grammar, and you understood what's going on, and you're ready to move on. Okay, so I'd always recommend you do that. If you haven't done it yet, pause the video, go work on that. Otherwise, we'll work our way through. And again, as long as your translation is something in the region of mine, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, and mine is never perfect, but it should be something to kind of help you out and make sure that you're on the right track. Okay? So story starts like this. And again, remember, we're picking up on De Bello Gallico, Caesar's Gallic War narrative. And this is really talking about book 1, right? His story of how the Gallic War started. That's what this is. It's an adaptation of that, okay? So you have multi gentes Galliam Incula, right? So that just means many peoples, many gentes, right? Many peoples are usually the good way to do it. They inhabit Gaul, right? Galliam Incula. Then he lists who they are. You have Helvetii, Sequani, Haedui, Sunt, Potentes, Gentes, Gallicae. So you have 3 groups of people here. You have the Helvetii, which is a really important one, the Sequani, and the Aedui. And sometimes you see this without the H, right? Aedui. But either way, they're just 3 really sort of important groups of people in terms of the Gallic Wars and book 1 of De Bello Gallico that Caesar's going to run into. And he says that they are potentes gentes Gallicae, right? They are powerful Gallic peoples, right? Gentes Gallicae, right? So these are 3 of the most powerful ones, okay? And if you're looking on the map here, I know it's a little harder to see, but you can find this. It's an open access map. Where we're talking about is really just past the Alps, right? So if you're looking on this map, you can see Gallia Cisalpina, right? That's the northern part of Italy. If you go across the Alps in that region of Switzerland, you'll see the Helvetii mark, you'll see the Sequani, and the Aedui are in that region too, right? The Aedui are a little more to the west. But you can see all 3 of these and kind of where they are in terms of Gaul, okay? And then it continues, and you have horum omnium fortissimi sunt Helvetii, right? So the most powerful, the fortissimi, the bravest or strongest of them all, right? Horum omnium of all of these are the Helvetii, right? So he's naming the Helvetii as being the most powerful. Then we continue, and you have fines eorum autem angusti sunt et undique continentur, right? So the fines eorum, right, the boundaries of them, meaning the boundaries of the Helvetii. However, right, so you have the autem there. They are angusti, they are narrow, right? And continentur, they are contained or they are confined, right? It's a passive verb. Undique means on all sides. And this is right out of De Bello Gallico, book 1, where he's saying that the Helvetii are stuck, right? And that's the whole narrative we're going to see. And it continues. You have una ex parte flumine Reno, qui agros Helvetiorum a Germanis dividit, altera ex parte monte Jura, qui est inter Sequanos et Helvetios, tertia ex parte lacu Lemano et flumine Rodano, qui provinciam Romanum ab Helvetiis dividit, right? So it's all kind of one long sentence with little breaks in it, okay? So it starts by saying una ex parte, right? So it says their lands are confined, and you have on one side or on one part, right, una ex parte, it's contained, right, continentur is sort of the implied verb here, by the flumine Reno, right, by the Rhine River. Okay, that's the border between Switzerland and France and Germany, right? So it's right in there. So you have by the Rhine River, which qui is referring to the Rhine, right? Which dividit, which divides the agros Helvetiorum, the lands of the Helvetians, from the Germans, a Germanis, right? So the Helvetians are blocked from the Germans on one side by the Rhine River. Then you have altera ex parte, right? On another side, it's continuing the idea of being contained. So you want to kind of imply that. So on another side, it is contained by the Monte Jura, the Jura Mountains, right? The Jura Mountain range, which is, I believe, an offshoot of the Alps. So the Jura Mountains here, the Jura Mountains, which is, and again, it's singular here because it's talking about the entire mountain range is kind of the idea. So a singular word representing a plural thing, right? There's more than one mountain. But by the Jura mountain range, which is between inter the Sequanos et Helvetios, right? The Sequani and the Helveti, right? So there's a mountain range on the other side, blocking them from those northern neighbors, the Sequani. Okay. Then you have tertia ex parte. So on the third part, or from a third part, it is contained, right? Their lands are contained by Lacu Lemano, by Lake Lemanus, right? And the Flumine Rodano and the Rhone River, right? The River Rhone, which dividit, right? Qui dividit, which divides the Provinciam Romanum, the Roman province, from the Helvetii, ab Helvetii, right? And here he's talking about the river blocking southern France from the Helvetii. So if you were to look on the map here that I put, again, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but the Roman province is that area in southern France, right? And it kind of stretches up close to the Helvetii. So you can see, even on this map, you can see the border where you have a lake in between the Helvetii and the Romans. That's the border that Caesar's talking about. Okay, so he's saying that these people, the Helvetii, are really in like a pocket of land that's contained on all sides. Okay. Then it continues, and you have istem causis, mercatores eus facile adire non possunt, neque Helvetii de finibus facile exire possunt. Okay, so he's saying for the same reasons, right? So you have istem causis, right? So for the same reasons, because of all these blockages, mercatores, merchants, are not able, non possunt, right? They are not able to go to them, right? Adire eos, they're not able to go to them facile, easily. Nor, neque, are the Helvetii, right? Helvetii there, nor are the Helvetii able to leave, exire possum, right? You have a complementary infinitive. They're not able to leave de finibus, from their borders, right? The word there is implied there. They're not able to leave from their borders facile, easily. So merchants can't get in, and the Helvetii are not able to get out. So they're sort of stuck. And that's Caesar's reasoning behind what happens in the Gallic Wars, right at the beginning of the war. Then you have sunt bellicosissimi et pericula libenter subeunt. Okay, so they are, meaning the Helvetii are, the most warlike, right? Bellicosissimi, that's how he describes them, the most bellicose. They are very warlike, you might say. And subeunt, they undergo, or they suffer, right? Literally subeunt, right? To go under. They undergo libenter, gladly, pericula, right? Dangers. So they sort of suffer dangers gladly or happily because they're so warlike, right? They're not afraid of anything, is kind of his idea. Then you have, in the next line, you have cum Germanis bellum saepe gerunt, nam aut in Germanorum finis eont et proilio contendunt aut ipsi a finibus Germanos prohibent. Right, so he's saying that they saepe gerunt bellum, right, or bellum gerunt. They often wage war with the Germans, cum Germanis, right. So they're constantly fighting with the Germans here. For, right, or because, you might even say, either they go, meaning, again, so saying that they wage war. So either they go into the borders of the Germans in finis Germanorum, right? So either they go into the borders of the Germans and contendunt proilio, and fight a battle, you could say, fight in battle, or they themselves, meaning the Helvetii themselves, they prohibit or prevent the Germanos, the Germans, a finibus, from their borders, right, from their own borders. So it's saying they're either going and attacking the Germans, or they're spending their time preventing the Germans from attacking them, right? That's the tough spot the Helvetii find themselves in, because they are stuck between, on every side, right? There's people there, and the Germans are very warlike, so they're constantly fighting. Okay, and that is actually the description Caesar gives in De Bello Gallico, right? He always is propping them up as being the fiercest of the Gauls, or one of the fiercest, and he names, for the reason why, is being because they're fighting the Germans constantly. Okay? And then it ends with this. You have est difficile autem propter angustos fines multis finitimis bellum infere, quade causa magno dolore afficiuntur. Okay? So he says that they wage war, all these things, and then he says it is difficult, however, right? Est difficile autem. It's difficult, however, to make war or to wage war. Bellum infere, it's the infinitive, to wage war on their many neighbors, multis finitimis, right? So it's difficult to wage war on many neighbors because of, propter, on account of their angustos fines, because of their narrow borders. So it's saying because of all these narrow borders, they actually are not able to really fight their neighbors very well, okay? And then you have quade causa, right? For this reason. Afficiuntur, they are afflicted, right? Magno dolore, by great sorrow or great sadness. And again, this is straight out of Caesar where he's describing them. Caesar says the Helvetii want to fight. They're very warlike and they want to wage war. They just can't because of their situation. Okay, that's one of his sort of key thoughts as to why the Gallic Wars start with the Helvetii. And again, we'll talk about it later when we read Caesar, but a lot of this is a little bit of finessing of the truth from Julius Caesar. Okay? Then you have pro multitudine hominum et pro gloria belli fines sunt minores et principes eos jubent latiores agros petere. So on account of, so you have a couple of things. So pro, so on account of the multitude of their people, right? Multitudine hominum, right? So because of, you might say, the crowd of the people, right? The multitude, the sort of number of people, and on account of the glory of war, gloria fines, right? The glory of warfare. Their borders, fines, sunt minores. Their borders are lesser, right? They're less than what they want. And their principes, right? The chiefs or chieftains, their leaders, jubent eos, order them, petere latiores agros, to look for wider lands, right? Latiores agros. So again, this is Caesar's claim that the Helvetii are going out looking for wider lands because they don't have any space. And again, part of that might be true. You're going to see Caesar saying because they want to go and fight these wars, and we can kind of interpret whether or not that's true, but that's what gets laid out in De Bello Gallico 1. Okay? And then we have these last two lines of our story. You have Orgetorix, potens princeps est regni cupidus, right? So Orgetorix, a powerful chief, a potens princeps, he is cupidus regni, he's desirous of a kingdom, meaning he wants a kingdom. Then you have ab eo multi nobiles conferentur. So from him, or by him, many nobles, many noble Helvetii, conferentur, they are collected, right? So they're brought together. So he's trying to group them in and try to lead them to these new borders, right? And you're going to see there's a conspiracy that's happening that Caesar's going to lay out, where the Helvetii rather are going to go off to war, right? There's this whole discussion of what's going on, what are their motivations, all these different things. Okay, so there's a lot of good history involved here, right? Again, it's coming from De Bello Gallico 1. It's been adapted a little bit, but you can still get a lot of the original Latin, or at least the spirit of it, in this chapter, right? So you want to look this stuff up. If you haven't, look into the Gallic Wars book 1. You'll kind of understand a lot more of what's going on here. But hopefully that made sense, right? It wasn't too bad to translate. If you have any questions at all, anything you're concerned about or didn't understand, feel free to put them in the comments below. But otherwise, the best bet with any of these stories, just keep reading it, read it aloud, right? Work on your speaking, your pronunciation, all these things. But just keep reading it until you're able to read it all the way through without any help. That's how you know you're really ready to move on. It might take you a little bit, but that's locking into your long-term memory and really understanding the